Hello everyone. So today let's have a look at a very common scenario. So it's a quick solution, but this problem I've seen in many places and many people have been looking into it, and there's a straightforward solution to it. But I thought let's put this together and see how exactly it works. Right. So our problem statement is, yeah, how do we add all the values present in a collection to a data source? Right. So we know that while playing with PowerApps and working on the Canvas applications, we do see there are multiple scenarios where we are creating multiple sorts of applications which have custom layouts, and then you end up creating collections, putting your data temporarily into those collections, and finally, committing that data to a data source. But in case your collection has multiple records, it has a different set of schema altogether, right? And your data source have a different schema. So how do you come up with a solution that puts in all the records from that collection to the data source in a go? So let's look at that, right? So let me take an example, right? So suppose we have this collection here, right? So this is a very simple, straightforward example. We can discuss on some complex examples as well. So let's look at this example first. So that's a collection of students information, right? So I have 5 fields here: name, contact number, email, class, and age. Now this data needs to be committed to another data source that has student information again. So this is the name of the data source. The field names are different: student name, parent contact number, parent email, academic class, and age, right? So now there can be 10 students, 20 students, 50 students in this particular collection, and all of them have to be added in this data source. So this is one example. Now if you look at a complex scenario, right? So now this could be a collection of maybe students as well as teachers, right? So it can be named as a HR data source, a HR resource, where there can be an entity by the name type, right? Where type is your, whether it's student, it's a teacher, or things like that, right? And then this one again is just a student data source data sample data set, right? So in that case, what you can do is filter out your data source, right? Get all the fields. Now for teachers, there can be multiple fields which are not relevant to this particular data source, but you can have all those fields filtered in a secondary collection, and from that collection you can only add the respective fields into your final data source, right? So all that can be done. And how it's achievable, so let's look at the exact formula for it, so that will give you a clear picture and you'll be able to understand how it can be done, right? So this is the simple formula that we have. Now let's first look at the functions that we are using here, right? So first of all, the for all function. So for all is iteration in PowerApps, right? So it goes through, the purpose of this function is to iterate through all the records in this particular collection and perform these operations, this formula or this function, the next function that is there as the second parameter, on all the records of the first collection, right? So if I have 50 students here, so all the 50 students, all the 50 records will be one by one going through this particular function that we have added as a second parameter. Now the functions that we are using in the second parameter is the patch function, that is to patch the record to the data source. Then we have the data source name, and then we are using the defaults function, right? So defaults function basically brings in all the default values from the data source for a record. So if you have a field which has some default value and you do not mention it here, so that field will regain that value from the defaults function, right? So now what we see here is, after I've done the patch on the data source, right, and using the defaults, the third parameter is the set of fields that we need to commit, right? So in this particular collection, I saw that I had student name, and the contrary name in the collection was this record dot name. So this record brings in the current record, right? So if you have any value that is static throughout all the records, you can put that value in a variable and just add the variable here. So it will give you the name of the variable, like maybe institute name, right? So institute name can be a variable, it can be a field in the student information, and instead of this record dot name, I'll just have the variable institute name there. So that's how your static values will also go into your data source, right? So what we saw is this record basically refers to the current record in the student collection, and for any static values we can use the variable names. So suppose I had 50 records in my collection now. So this particular function, this particular patch function will now iterate through all those 50 records and add them to your students information data source. So this is the simple and straightforward solution to this particular scenario where you need to put the records from one collection to uh, uh, another data source which has different sort of schema, different sorts of mappings. So this is the straightforward and the simplest solution that you can see. In case you still have any questions or there is any variation, any doubts or anything that you want to discuss, or maybe come up with a new video on some topic, so just put that in the comments and we'll look into that. And for this particular topic, I hope that it's much clearer now and you'll be able to implement it, let it be using a simple collection, a complex collection, static values, or the values from the collection itself. Thank you.